big adventure where she does the stop motion clay
Uh-huh.
face. And that was like, I wanted to recreate those things.
I said it's a cartoon, it's animation. We can have anything and everything we think is right to in there. But he said no.
Because I'm such a dark, twisted dude. Like, I love horror stuff. I love blood. I love weird stuff. I mean, go watch any of my shorts.
Hello and welcome to Prolific Perspective. This is Kamal Hassan, your host and founder of Prolific Animation Studio. We are all about exploring innovation, entrepreneurship, and how to be successful. Today we have an amazing guest with us, a founder and CEO of Flush Studios, Josh Stifter. Hey Josh, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate you having me.
Glad to have you. All right, Josh. So I've been reading about you, about your studio, about your early days in the animation industry. So please give your brief introduction to our audience.
Yeah, so I'm an animator. I went to school for animation, started as an
Hmm.
animator. I worked with Kevin Smith. I did a bunch of personal projects and just worked in animation, and that slowly led to me starting my business as I was taking on bigger and bigger projects.
Hmm.
And from there, it sort of turned into working professionally as an animation director and getting more into motion graphics. There was a lot of motion graphic work happening at the time. So I just kind of pivoted with what was happening at the
Hmm.
time
Hmm.
to keep my studio going and keep creating animation. And then I got into doing live action films and stuff, but that also it gave me an opportunity to incorporate my animations into my features. So the business just kind of built off of whatever I could do at that time.
Great. So if we talk about your early days, and I was reading about you got into animation at the age of 11, which was impressive and surprising for me as well when I was reading about it. And you teach yourself with stop motion with a family camera. What sparked that early love of animation, and how did those first projects shape your career?
Yeah, so I was a huge fan of two things that got me into animation. Tim Burton, which, Nightmare Before Christmas, all of his movies had this. Like, there's that scene with Large
Hmm.
Marge and Pee-wee's Big Adventure where she does the stop motion clay
Uh-huh.
face. And that was like, I wanted to recreate those things, those weird moments. There was just something about animation that
Hmm.
it sort of like played into my creative mind as a kid. I mean, I think it does for a lot of kids, but for me, it was like I could express sort of some of the weird
Hmm.
I saw in my head. I could get it out in animation form. And my dad had this
Hmm.
VHS camera,
Okay.
and I learned how to take the VHS camera and hit record, and I would count. I go one and two and I'd hit the button again, and it would take like 3 or 4 frames. And so I would make these little stop motions out
Uh-huh.
of clay or my toys doing that, like one and two and move the toy a little
Hmm.
bit, one and two and move the toy a little bit. And I could make these really rudimentary animations. And then South Park, I'm gonna be honest, South Park came out and it
Uh-huh.
looked terrible. Like that weird paper
Uh-huh.
cutout style that it used. It
Hmm.
felt like I could do it. So I would start using I would use Paint, Microsoft Paint, and I would just draw a whole bunch of pictures. And then I had a software that it
Really?
was, I mean, it
Uh-huh.
wasn't made for animation. It was made for video editing, but it would allow you to cut up frames. And
Yeah.
I could do animation on like twos or threes through that. So I would just draw
Hmm.
every picture in Paint and then play it back,
Uh-huh.
and it looked like an animation. And so I would do the same thing. South Park, it was a lot of like kids running across the street and getting hit by a car, or random
Uh-huh.
stuff like South Park would do, really
Hmm.
messed up stuff. Kenny, like, oh my God, they killed Kenny type stuff over and over again. So that's really what got me into it when I was a little kid. But when I got
Uh-huh.
into school, like high school, anytime I
Hmm.
could do a video or do animation for class, that's what I did. Like every time. So that was like the impetus to be like, I'm going to go into animation.
Great, impressive. So building a studio from scratch is no small feat. What inspired you to create Flush Studios, and how has its mission evolved over the years?
Yeah, so Flush Studio started as just an excuse for me to create stuff. And it was something that me and the studio started. I mean, the actual idea started in high school. Me and my buddy Dan,
Hmm.
there was a school paper called The Flash. And the
Okay.
two of us were not we weren't allowed to be involved. We were just too weird for the school. They didn't like our stuff. So we were like,
Hmm.
okay, screw it. Let's make our own magazine. So we made The Flush, which was just
Okay.
making fun of the Flash constantly. It was our version
Hmm.
of that. And I drew little cartoons for that in comics, but as we
Hmm.
progressed in making videos, doing animation and all this stuff, the name just stuck. Flush Studios just kind of stuck with me, and my stuff is kind of dark and twisted and gross,
Uh-huh.
so Flush fit properly.
I was
And
reading over your profile and I saw all the work that you have done in your studio. So yeah.
I'm into weird stuff, man. I love doing things, and it's fun because it's one of those
But
things
but
where like,
it's
yeah,
exciting at the same time. It's exciting at the same time. Yeah.
and there's a need for it. I have a lot of people who come to me asking for animation that is, it's
Hmm.
not stuff that normal studios do. I do the weird stuff and I really enjoy doing stuff. Like right now, I'm working with a guy on a movie called Vampire. It's like a Bambi vampire movie, and it's like a mixture of it's sort of like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where there's animation mixed with live
Hmm.
action, and I'm doing all of the animation for it. And it's really fun
Hmm.
because that's not a project that, there's not a lot of people who can take on a project like that. But because my style is weird, it's a little bit twisted,
Uh-huh.
it's another thing I can build my business into.
So working with Kevin Smith and SModco, Kevin Smith SModco podcast project were big for you. What was like creating animation based on a Smodcast podcast, and how did that experience change the way you approach the storytelling?
Here's the thing. The main thing I learned during that project, now it was fun. It helped me start my business. Like the money that I earned off of that and Tusk was
Hmm.
how I started Flush Studios. That's how I was able, my wife
Great.
was able to quit her job, be a stay-at-home mom. I could
Hmm.
focus entirely on running my
Hmm.
business. And but the main thing I learned was how to set deadlines and goals because our turnaround time on those animations was incredibly fast. It was like 2 minutes of animation in 2 weeks. So I worked for Kevin Smith, who directed Tusk, for
Hmm.
many years before Tusk came out. That's actually my first animation job right out of college was
Hmm.
working for Kevin Smith, animating his podcast.
Hmm.
So he would record the podcast and then I would take it and I would cut like a 2 minute clip out of that and I would have to
Hmm.
animate that conversation into like a 2 minute fun little
Uh-huh.
animation.
Uh-huh.
And from there, he liked my style, and I talked with his producer Ken Plume, who was doing those animations.
Hmm.
He thought I would be a good fit because I love horror movies. So I'm a huge movie guy in general. Like I love
Uh-huh.
everything, but
Uh-huh.
because I'm so interested in horror films, he thought my style would kind of fit with that. So I
Hmm.
animated the podcast that Tusk was based on, and then ended up doing like a lot of this disturbing animation in the movies. Some of it was cut, some of it was used, but in the end, it was this fun collaboration with Kevin where we got to sort of make something
Hmm.
gross and fun.
So you work with the movie Tusk as well. So how did you bring your style to the project, and what inspired the director to create the unusual turning a human into walrus? Because I saw that scene and I found it quite disturbing, the whole idea. So how was your experience with that?
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenge was figuring out the style and working with the director and trying to figure out like what are we trying to show and what are we trying to say with this.
Hmm.
And it's like any project where there's a lot of back and forth and trying to
Hmm.
figure out like what would fit best for the project. But it's
Hmm.
animatics, it's following. So I think one of the biggest difference was the fact that wasn't able to follow I wasn't able to say what the process was. Usually, when I'm animating, I'm able to say what the
Hmm.
process is. But when you're
Hmm.
working with a studio, when you're working with different people,
Hmm.
obviously, like everyone works in a different way. So for
Hmm.
me, one of those challenges was
Hmm.
adapting. Like I talked about earlier, it's always about adapting and figuring out
Uh-huh.
like, okay, how do I finish this project
Hmm.
in their guidelines, in their rules and
Wow.
regulations.
Hmm.
And one of the things I liked about Tusk was I learned a lot about what I personally want to do. So in my films, I was able to
Uh-huh.
take from what I learned in working on that movie. And when I went and made my feature
Hmm.
films, I was like, this is what I would have done different. This is what I would have done the same. This is what I
Yeah.
liked about the animation. And I was able to
Hmm.
take that and incorporate it into my project. So I think with every project you work on, even if it seems like a project you're not liking, or if it's a project that you don't feel like you're
Hmm.
gaining any knowledge from, or you feel like you're just kind of like doing it by the numbers. I think there's something to
Uh-huh.
learn from every project you work on.
Yeah.
Learn what you like about it, learn what you don't like. Keep notes. I've learned to journal everything. I write journals for stuff because when I write it, it gets it out of my
Hmm.
head onto a page. And a lot of us as creatives, as animators,
Uh-huh.
as studio
Hmm.
runners, our
Hmm.
brains don't think in our head. Our brains want to think
Yeah.
outside. We want to put stuff out there. Our brains think on the page. Our brains write
Yeah,
stuff down. I'm sure you
absolutely.
have meetings with employee or with people you work for or clients or whatever, and
Hmm.
you're writing on a whiteboard. We're all writing stuff down because we need to
Yeah,
visualize it. Visualize
absolutely.
it, write it down, figure it out that way. And that was a big part of Tusk was learning like what I like, what I don't like, what I want to use. And that style that I used in Tusk I have used in so many projects. It was kind of a
Hmm.
silhouette style of animation, and
Hmm.
I was kind of mixing. I was kind of mixing like a stop motion style, but hand drawn. So it was kind of like a cutout style, hand
Uh-huh.
drawn that then I brought into After Effects and like composited it on 3D. So it almost looked like you were watching like this
Hmm.
cutout anim or like what is that called where you do like the light screens where you do like a have a puppet like puppets in front of a silhouette
You
style.
mean Kurova? You mean Kurova? Like green screen
No,
stuff?
so it's
No, no. Uh-huh.
no, so like if you had it's like an old school style of puppeteering where they would do like a backlight against a screen and you would have the puppets
Oh,
inside and it would be
uh-huh,
like
uh-huh,
so it kind of looked like that and it was just a
uh-huh,
very unique
uh-huh.
style. And I've since used that on multiple projects. I used it, I did animation for Sci-Fi Channel, like the Sci-Fi
Hmm.
Network, and I used
Hmm.
that same kind of style for that project. I've done it
Hmm.
in multiple projects and I love the style. So taking that we kind of work together to find and sort of making it my own personal.
So I completely get it where you're coming from. So you have directed both animated shorts and live action films. How does your creative approach change between animation and live action?
That's a great question because it changes. Like I said, like there's a difference in with live action, you're setting a expectation on things you have very little control over. So
Hmm.
you like your pre-planning, it still is very much like the animatic phase of animation where
Hmm.
I think like what is it going to look like? I'm a storyboarder. Like I will draw stick figures and little characters and whatever through the
Hmm.
entire movie. The day before a shoot, I'll sit down and I'll be like, okay, this shot, this shot, this shot, and essentially animate it. Like I've literally sat down with my actors and had
Hmm.
cards with all of the shots and been like, this is shot one, here's the line, here's shot two, here's shot three,
Hmm.
and I like act it out for them and show them close up, medium shot, close up, whatever. And so like but that need to plan so much more for animation because you're not winging it. You're drawing every
Yeah.
picture or you're animating every keyframe or you're creating like I can look at an actor and be like, "Oh, you look like this. Let's put this hat on you. Let's do this thing." But I still think about it from the mindset of someone who's creating a character in animation where you have so much control that you're just like, I don't even know where to start. Like where I'm going to put the eyes, where's the mouth going to go? What's the shape? Like I'm drawing these stick figures
Hmm.
in real life, you look at a guy and you're like, okay, he's tall and he's skinny. Like this is what I
Absolutely.
got. You know, I can draw. So here's my perfect example. Father Gill is a character from my movie The Good Exorcist. My buddy Daniel, who plays him, he's got a red beard. He's tall. He's gonna, he's skinny. He's got a side haircut. Now, if I was going to make this character in animation, I could do whatever I want to him. I can elongate the nose. I can make him
Absolutely.
cartoonish in this way or that way. I can make his arms extend longer. If he's skinny, I want him to be real lanky or whatever. And I can
Hmm.
animate the way he moves and stuff like that. But Daniel's going to do what he does when he becomes that character. So when I look at him, I'm like, I want to give you a little bit of cartoonish character. I'm going to give you a goofy cowboy hat. I'm gonna
Hmm.
have you walk. I mean, when you walk, I want you to bounce on your steps. Like I give him motion like I would in animation, and I direct him in that way. Now, it may not be as much as the animation would be, and I probably will never get him to do what I would do in the animation, but I use
Hmm.
those simple concepts that I've learned in animation.
Uh-huh.
Um, and a lot of that, a lot of it, kind of translates over from what I would do in animation, where I think about cause and reaction a lot because
Hmm.
that's like what you do in animation. Like we're taught in our first days of animation classes about squash and stretch. Like that's one of the first things you learn is draw the bouncing ball animation and learn how that ball moves. Now, if you took frame by frame pictures of a ball, it would never bounce the same way in real
Absolutely.
life it does in animation. That exaggeration is something I've learned some from, so I try to, when I'm directing my cast or when I'm shooting a shot that's action, I exaggerate. I'm like, what is the squash and stretch of this in real
Hmm.
life?
Great. So, in fact, if you talk about these animations, yesterday I was explaining this to a client that we are making a Christmas commercial for him, and I told him that we are showing a Christmas Eve. I'm thinking to have a snowfall in there. He says, in my states, in Sarasota, Florida, there is no snowfall, so don't put the snowfall in there. I said it's a cartoon, it's animation. We can have anything and everything we think is right to in there. But he said no. It's Florida. We don't get snowfalls. I was okay. You're right. You should have like get the live action instead of animation for the Christmas
Yeah.
commercial. So what
Well,
what what's
that's a really good. Oh, I think you made a really good point though about the fact that like
Mhm,
people tend to, and this is something I've noticed a lot recently,
mhm.
is people tend to think inside of their box, inside of their
Yeah.
perspective. And the wonderful thing about animation is you don't have to. Like that's what I love
Yes.
about animation is I can think out the box is here and I'm all over the place. And then I pop in and it feels weird when I do pop in and like you can do anything. And
So in
it does make
animation,
for
you feel like God. I can create
yeah.
anything, right? I have a free room. I'm not bound to my box, so I can, create my own reality. I can put anything and everything in there to make it good, make it like appealing. So I would agree with you in this, 100%.
For sure.
All right. So what's your all-time favorite animated film, and how has it shaped your creative approach or inspired your project?
Oh man, that is a really good question. I mean, like all-time favorite animated film. Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the Wallace and Gromit movies. And
Yeah.
so, like the short films from back in the day and Curse of the
Hmm.
Were-Rabbit. Like I love Wallace and Gromit and it really I think
Hmm.
Wallace and Gromit shaped me in showing me that like because I'm such a dark twisted dude, like I love horror stuff, I love blood, I love weird stuff. I mean, go watch any of my shorts. If you watch Minnow, if you watch anything I've done, you'll see I like weird things
Hmm.
in my personal life. And which is really funny when clients come to me and ask for like really simple stuff. And, my wife or my kids will come in and I'll be animating something like incredibly, outside of the realm of what I would know. I worked for a Christian media company for three
Oh.
years as an animation director doing
Hmm.
curriculum-based animation from the Bible. Like that is so different from anything else you'd imagine I do if you ever watch
Uh-huh.
any of my shorts. But I love to jump around from thing to thing. But Wallace and Gromit really taught me like you don't have to be vulgar, you don't have to be twisted, you don't have to be weird. You can do something that's cute and fun and still make it incredibly enjoyable. But, like I love all sorts of animation. I grew up in the era of the
Hmm.
Flash, like the early days of Flash animation, and that was the thing that made me go like, okay, I'm gonna try this because you could do
Hmm.
it. Like I had a really really well, I think it was probably like torrented or something. If I'm being honest, I have no idea where I got this copy of 2000 Flash
Yeah.
2001 or something, or Flash
Hmm.
MX. I don't even remember what it was called
Yeah.
at the time, but this early
Huh.
version of Flash. And I was watching like Joe Cartoon and Homestar Runner and all of these things and just going like, I want to make this kind of animation. So those kind of animations. But I also like I got to go back to the class like Nightmare Before Christmas. Without that, I probably wouldn't care about animation. It's been a movie I've watched since I was a kid and I continue to watch to this day.
So we are talking about Flash, and I will take you to the evolving technology. How do you think emerging technologies like AI and virtual reality are impacting animation and filmmaking? Is it
That's
making our
funny.
lives
That's a
easy? Uh-huh.
I wish it was, honestly. I
Uh-huh.
haven't used like I'm so bad at AI stuff and like I've tried to see how it would work in my animation my
Hmm.
personal animations, like save me time, and
Hmm.
it doesn't look the way my stuff looks. I haven't used AI
Absolutely.
technology much at all, and I find it to be like it loses the appeal of what makes my kind of nastiness look interesting. And while I think there's something fun, I do think there's something incredibly fun about looking at AI pictures, being inspired by the way the computer mind works and going like, wow, that's a different kind of nasty than I would have thought of.
Hmm.
Or like little things. My brother-in-law sent me a video or a picture, like a handful of pictures that he had
Uh-huh.
basically put in a prompt of Father Gill from The Good Exorcist and was like,
Hmm.
"This is what AI thinks Father Gill should look like." And he sent me
Uh-huh.
like 10 drawings that AI had made, and I was like, "Wow, this is so different than what I ever would have thought." But there
Uh-huh.
was like a few tiny little things where I'm like, you know what? I would steal this concept from the computer and be like, he's at one point he has like two crucifixes on his body, so weird.
Uh-huh.
But honestly, AI technology has done nothing for me as far as actual creation goes because I so I feel like I have built my own style so specifically that anytime something tries to recreate it, it just doesn't feel right to me. I can see what I would have done different.
I would agree with you because AI, I think it will take another 10, 20 years to get AI mature. Maybe they'll have to install some kind of a chip in their, in our head to create something, whatever we are thinking in our mind. I tried AI as well, and whenever I give a prompt to AI, I don't get what I want in an output. So I would agree with you in that. So what have you been some unexpected skills or lessons you have picked up along the way that have helped you thrive in such a competitive industry?
That's a great question. I think one of the big things I've learned throughout the years is to
Hmm.
be what's the word? Like open to communication because that's the
Hmm.
biggest issue is
Hmm.
um when communication doesn't come together, that's when projects struggle. And I use this, I have this saying where I'm like, don't treat anything like it's sacred. Because,
Hmm.
and to me, what that means is like, don't get stuck in your head about what you believe in for a specific project. Like, make
Hmm.
sure you're always adapting, think it through. Don't be, don't be partial to your own opinion. Take everyone's opinion. Generally, when you're working with someone, everyone is in it together. No one is like out to get anyone. Now, granted, I've been in experiences where I'm working
Hmm.
with clients and I realize like halfway through, oh, I got hired because they wanted me to fail. And like they purposely picked someone who they thought would not fit with the company because they were trying to prove a point about like what they should be doing or who they should be working with. That stuff has happened before, but at the same
Hmm.
time, all of those have always worked out pleasantly or worked out in the end because I've just been able to adapt and been like, okay, what do you need? What are you looking for? I can
Hmm.
help you figure it out on this project, and maybe you can still prove your point in whatever
Hmm.
way you're trying to prove. Um,
Uh-huh.
but but I think like that, all of that to say, like, it's really about adapting. We were just talking about technology with AI, and while
Absolutely.
AI hasn't been something I've used, I think adapting to technology is something that is important to me. Constantly going like, okay, what should I be using now? Like, I know so many people who have got stuck on software and not willing to adapt to a new software because
Absolutely.
they're they know it. It's easy. I'm here. I've been using Maya for 20 years. I can't move on to
Right.
something else. And I mean, I haven't been, but like people who I used Maya when I was in college, and
Hmm.
then, I wasn't able to continue to pay for it as it moved on a subscription. It just got incredibly expensive, especially
Hmm.
as I was early in my career and I moved on to using Blender for anything 3D because it was
Hmm.
free. And I've continued to use Blender and I've adapted using Blender and don't have to pay for,
Yeah.
a massive software. And I think there's a lot
Hmm.
of people out there who don't want to hop into something new. I know like people get stuck on Final Cut and editing, or they get stuck on
Yeah.
Premiere, or they get stuck on whatever, and they're not willing to adapt as new software is coming out. Adapting, that's like what it really boils down to, and figuring out like what's happening now and how can I learn it. And part of it boils down to time. We don't want to learn new software because we don't have the time. We don't want to change our style because of the time. We don't want to go back and work on a project that we started 5 years ago because we don't have the
Hmm.
time. If you can find the drive and figure out the time, figuring out your your way to adapt in this moment. I think that's huge. I mean, I learned how to stick to deadlines. When there's a deadline and someone's paying you, you stick to it, you keep them happy, and they'll keep coming back to you for more and more work.
Absolutely. 100%.
But I also learned that setting realistic deadlines can improve the project. So, trying to get something done that I know in 2 weeks isn't going to look as good as it can. If I had given myself if I had done it, I would have given us 4 weeks or 6 weeks to get it done because it would have just improved that much more. So I think one of the things with animation that a lot of people take for granted or don't think about is the deadline. How long is something going to take? We all look at it and we're like, I think I could have it done in 3 weeks. And then it takes, 8 weeks and you're still not done because animation always, it can take as long as you want. It's not like a film shoot where you go and you're like,
Absolutely, because creativity takes a lot of time. Whenever the filmmakers or people who want the project to be done, they think everything can be done in a few hours. Why do you need a lot of time, few months or few weeks to get it done? But you are right, there shouldn't be any deadline when you are making animations. It's a whole creative process. We got to get deep into that project, feel it, then we draw it, right? So I would agree
Totally.
with
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah. Even
Mhm.
just the simple stuff of like, I feel like there's a lot of times where people, they just think they're going to be given animation. Like, I want this, give me, that's what I want to see in the end. But the reality is you're creating something from nothing. I mean, you're playing God every time you start animating
Absolutely.
something. There are no outside forces. And that's the
Hmm.
beauty of doing live action and animation is with live action, I've learned you have to play with what you're given all the time. There's outside forces, there's weather, there's someone is sick, there's something else is happening, there's all these things. But with animation, it's literally
Hmm.
a blank slate. It's nothing. You start with zero and you can make anything you imagine. But
Absolutely.
you
Hmm.
have to have the time. It doesn't happen overnight. And you also have to
Hmm.
have the ability to understand breaking things down, especially when you're working with other people. So, like, I've made it a point when I'm working with a client I show them every piece of the process, every tiny thing. I will send them like a day's work. I know a lot of animators won't do that. They want them to see
Absolutely.
something that's good. I'm the opposite. I'm like, look at my bad stuff. Look at what I did today, and I'm going to tell you how many hours I spent on this. So when I come back to you and I say like, this isn't going to happen by Monday. You can see why it's not going to happen
Yeah.
by Monday because I put 20 hours into sending you the animatic because you kept
Hmm.
sending back notes on the
Yeah.
animatic. And but I can't tell you how many times when I was young I would send
Hmm.
what I thought was a final and I would get back 1,000 notes that were like, "Whoa, you're way wrong. This is not what we talked about." And I'm like, "This is literally what we talked about. Like literally I'm giving you what you asked for." And it just
Uh-huh.
because it doesn't match what was in your imagination doesn't mean it's not what you asked for. So yeah, that's my process has become like show everything, every piece of the process so that the client goes like on the adventure of creating it with me.
And at the end of the day, so that's not gonna happen. Like you will make everything, and then the client say, "Okay, I don't like just change the direction." So I think that's the right way to do things. Show every piece of the progress you make every day with your client. So you won't have to change everything at the end when the project is done, because this
Yeah,
happens
and I
to us
can't
as well. Yeah, we
all
we
the
are done
time.
with the animatics. We are done with the animatics when we are into a grayscale animation phase. Client come to us, okay, we want to change this, we want to change that character. I think it's not looking good and all of that. So it takes a lot. They
No, I
become
love that because it is
yeah.
it's never like the simplest thing. It's never like I don't like these 3 frames. Can we redo these 3 frames? It's always like I don't like the character's eyes.
uh,
And you're like, "Well,
yeah.
that's the drawing. Like the drawing has looked like that. I can't like it's not as simple as just like, "Oh, let me do the eye button and click 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 the eyes are different." That's just not the way it works in animation, especially cuz a lot of my stuff is 2D. I'm hand drawing everything. Now, I've also learned over the years to break everything down, like the amount of layers I have by the end of an animation, because when that
Uh-huh.
client does say, I don't like the eyes, I want to be able to go like, okay, I can go to the eyes and I can fix them because that kind of stuff happens all the time. And it becomes so frustrating when I've drawn literally
Hmm.
like every picture and then they don't like
Hmm.
something that makes me have to go back to the whole thing.
Correct. I'm actually, I recently had a conversation with my team. In fact, yesterday I was sitting with my team and we were discussing the exact same problem for a project that we have been working on from the past 4 months, so almost 16 weeks now, and we are not able to finalize the direction because every time, whenever we share progress with a client, they say, I don't like this, I don't like that, let's go back to the animatics phase. So, advice for aspiring creators, what one piece of advice you give to animators and filmmakers starting out today, especially those trying to create with limited resources?
So it's funny you bring up limited resources because I don't buy that. I mean, I'm working
Mm-hmm,
with my son right now. He's 11 years old and he loves animation. He's getting into it.
mm-hmm,
He's trying stuff and there's so much accessible. Now, granted, he's my son, so he has access to like me explaining to him what he could
yeah,
use. Now, it would be awesome if he'd ever listen to me, but he purposely does everything the opposite of what I say, as children love to do. But it's
yeah,
great because I see like he's finding his path of what software he wants to use. It's never what I tell him. I'm like, dude, I can show you Premiere, I can help you edit in Premiere, I can show you how to do like um, you
mm-hmm,
know, um, do frame exports or do whatever. I can show you whatever you need to see in Premiere for editing. And he's like, no, I
mm-hmm,
don't want to use that. And he has his software he uses.
mm-hmm,
But and I can show him how I use Blender or my technique. He finds his own way of doing things. But like
mm-hmm,
he's got access to an old computer. He doesn't have anything super nice, but he still found a way to make it you work with Blender and learn how to do
mm-hmm,
simple animations. I think at the
mm-hmm.
end of the day, you just got to have the passion to do it. Like, tell yourself,
Yeah.
I'm going to do something today. And just like, don't think that you're going to. This was my biggest fault when I was young, is I thought that it should be easier. Like, everything
Yeah.
should come together. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
see it on TV. Why does it not come out like I see on TV?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the way it works. You just got to take it a day at a time. Do a tutorial today. Do something today. Like, but everything is so accessible. Like
Uh-huh.
I'm almost 40 years old and I'm doing the donut blender tutorial again because it's just fun to do and I learn something new
Yeah.
every time I do it. Yeah, I have a pretty good understanding of how to animate in Blender. I have a pretty good idea
Mm-hmm.
of how to like set up
Mm-hmm.
lights, run camera, export, do all the normal stuff that you need to do. But then I do a tutorial like this and
Mm-hmm.
I learn something new every time. Take it, do stuff like that. Do if you're interested in animation, one of the
Mm-hmm.
one of my biggest suggestions is find a film festival that you can make an animation for.
Yeah.
Something not like a 48 hour, find something that gives you some time, like
Yeah.
a festival that's local that you're going to be able to go
Mm-hmm.
watch your
Mm-hmm.
movie on a big screen. When I was in Minnesota, they had a festival called Z Fest.
Mm-hmm.
Go to Z Fest, apply. You get like 3 months to work on your short film, make an animation for that festival, so you get to watch it on the big screen, enjoy the show, and see how people react. Because that's the best way to learn is seeing what people think, trying things, and giving yourself a deadline.
Great. So, it's been amazing, discussing your projects and all. I want to go back again on Flush Studios. Like, how do you find that, found that a studio, co-founded, or you were the founder actually. And what were the challenges you faced when you started a studio? Funding, softwares, equipment. What were the main challenges you faced to set it up that studio? Because when I started my studio, my background was technology. I had an IT company, IT firm, and transformation from an IT firm to an animation studio was pretty tough, pretty hard. And taking that
Yeah.
animation studio and scaling it to a $2 million animation studio, it was tough. It was, hard to get here. So, what were your challenges?
I think so. When I started the studio, I had initial work because I was working with Kevin and I had
Hmm.
some projects lined up and stuff like that. And then I think the biggest challenge was actually when that well dried up,
Hmm.
figuring out what to do next. Because like, how do you find clients? Who do you go to? There's a lot of challenges in figuring out like what sets you apart from
Hmm.
other studios? What makes
Hmm.
you somewhere where people should go to find work. And
Uh-huh.
when you're just starting out, you're just figuring out, especially I was a solo studio. I was running it entirely myself. I was doing all animation myself. I was doing everything.
Hmm.
So, trying to find the kind of work that I could do to continue the studio to make money I mean, at the end of the
Hmm.
day, that's what I was trying to do with taking on contracts. Like, I wasn't doing that for fun. I wasn't going like, I really want to go work with other people. I would love to continue to make my own short films, my own movies, my own stuff. But in order to fund that, I had to be bringing in clients. I had to be continuing to do work that funded the
Wow.
other projects.
Hmm.
So, I think that was a big hurdle to get over. And honestly, it boiled down to
Hmm.
saying yes a lot, even to stuff that you're like, this is so stupid. Why am I doing this? Like
Yeah.
I did jobs for stuff that you'd just be like, why would you do like motion? I was doing motion graphic stuff for like
Uh-huh.
like animating pamphlets for like conferences so people could show
Hmm.
off pamphlets. It's just a
Hmm.
throwaway job that doesn't have any
Hmm.
creative energy behind it. It was literally just client work, but it kept the lights on. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, you just got to be honest with yourself that like I need to keep the lights on. I need to keep going. I need to find
Hmm.
work to do. But then also set aside time where you go, I'm going to work on projects
Hmm.
for the studio, things that show
Yeah,
what we do, show what we want to be, because eventually you'll get there. It's not going to
absolutely.
happen. Rome wasn't built in a day, as they say, and you're not going to get it in your first year,
Hmm.
probably. It may take you 2 years, it may take you 3 years, but if you're building up your own style, your own media while you're doing that other stuff that keeps the lights on,
Hmm.
you'll look back and you'll, like, 5 years from the day you
Hmm.
start, you'll look back and be like, whoa, I've got like all of
Yeah.
this, like I got hard drives full of my own stuff. And it happens
Yeah.
faster than you think as long as you do
Absolutely.
it. That's the thing is like people just if you keep setting it aside, if you keep writing another script and not creating it, if you keep going like, well, I've got this work to do, I'm not going to work on it today, it never
Yeah.
will get done. But if you do like, we're going to take Fridays and we're going to animate something for our studio.
Yeah.
Monday through Thursday, we do contract work, we work our butts off, but on Friday, we're going to do something for us.
Hmm.
After 6 months, you'd be shocked how much you have done. After 2 years, you're not going to know what to do with all of it. You're going to look back at the stuff from your first months and be like, well, we're not going to show that anymore. Now we're doing this stuff only.
I think it's a great advice. And as you just mentioned that when you started a studio, you already had the contract. So what it really takes for contracts, like is that networking, your connections, you had to do some like digital marketing, or how do you have those projects with you
It's
already?
all of it. It's all of it. It's throwing
Uh,
yourself out there on social media and being like, does anyone
mm,
need work? Does anyone need stuff?
mm,
It's when you do get a job, you tell them like, hey man, I'm still looking for more stuff after this. If you have anyone who needs anything,
mm,
let me know. It's it's hopping on sites like Fiverr and taking small jobs that get you that different styles, get you the rapport with other people. Because at the end of the day, when someone's on LinkedIn looking at your portfolio, looking for an animator, and they're like, "Oh, I like your style,"
mm.
you don't know what that's going to be. So if you're
Uh-huh.
just working on your own stuff, if you're only working with specific groups, you're not
Uh-huh.
branching out. You're not diversifying your portfolio of style and portfolio of things you can work on. And when you're
Hmm.
first starting out, especially when you're first starting out, you need that diversity. You need to be able to say like I
Yeah,
can do a lot. And
absolutely.
taking those I think one of the other things is people are terrified about that quick turnaround job because it doesn't seem it feels like you're nickel and diming when you're, first starting
Hmm.
out and you're going like, I'm not going to take a job for $200 because that's not enough. The reality is like do $200 worth of work. Be honest with that person and tell them like, think about what $200 is. I can
Hmm.
do 2 days of work for you. Like that's it.
Yeah.
And then we got to move on and give them 2 days worth of work. And if they see something, I can't tell you how
Hmm.
many times someone has told me like, this is my, because that's my question. When they ask you, this is what I hate when you're starting out, especially. I've got to the point where I know what I do. Like I know how much everything is worth. I know what it's going to cost. I throw them like this is going to be
Yeah.
$500, $5,000, 1,000 or $10,000. Here's what you get.
Yeah.
But when you're starting
Hmm.
out, you don't know what those numbers are. And they tell you like this is what I need, how much is it going to cost? And you go like I don't
I
know.
don't
I
know.
haven't
I
done it.
don't
I don't know how long it's going to take. I have no
know.
idea. So
Yeah.
figuring out how long it's going to take and giving them a deadline versus giving them you've seen those pictures where it's like
Yeah.
a drawing of a horse and it's like 5 hours,
Yeah.
10
Yeah.
hours, 100 hours, and it gets better
Mhm.
and better and better. I literally will say that. I'll be like, I can give you the $100 deal, I can give you the $1,000 deal, and I can give you the $5,000 deal.
Great. Great. So where do you see your studio, Flush Studio in the next 10, 15 years? if you talk about scalability and all.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question because I've actually moved away from doing a lot of
Hmm.
the contract work and a lot of the taking on client projects because my own personal projects have kind of taken the forefront. And
Wow.
as a director, as a filmmaker, I've been able to push my filmmaking. And
Hmm.
so I mean I hope to continue that. I hope in 10 or 50 years you guys are seeing movies from me, in 15 years, I hope that there's a whole
Hmm.
bunch of animations, a whole bunch of films, projects I've
Uh-huh.
written, projects I've produced, projects I've directed, and it is more like, a A24, XYZ, like that sort of the
Great.
company, like that's where I
Hmm.
would like to go with Flush is to make movies and continue to make animations or make movies that utilize animation in the way that I creatively feel
Impressive.
engaged with.
Impressive. Impressive. It was an amazing conversation with you, Josh.
Yeah,
We
man, thank you
learned,
so
and
much for having
I
me.
pleasure, pleasure. And I hope the audience will watch this. They will learn from your advices how they can run their own animation studio. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Prolific Perspectives. I hope you enjoyed our insightful conversation with Josh. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Stay tuned until next time.